Hey guys, my name's Jackson, and in this video I'm going to show you how to use the save game assets and saving and loading your data in Unreal. I remember when I first started doing Unreal and I first started to get into save games, all the tutorials that I found on it were like, they got the job done, but they were like sort of shit and like very cumbersome to use, and I found myself copying and pasting a lot of code, and it was just like a hassle for me to use save games, and it'd get very confusing very quickly, and it was just a pain in the ass. So what I'm going to do today is show you how I use save games in my projects today, and a couple of tips and tricks and things that you can use to streamline the process so that it's very easy for you to save data and load data on the fly whenever you want from any asset that you like, to just really make it seamless whenever you're saving and loading, so there's no like weird complicated blueprints or whatever. So I'm in a third person template in 5.2, Unreal Engine 5.2. I'm just going to create a new folder down here and just call this save games. The first point to say is that I do all my saving and loading from a blueprint function library, and the reason that I do that is because saving and loading is something that I want to be able to do from any blueprint all over the game, whether it's from, say, like a overlapping box over here that, you know, increases your score when you overlap it, or maybe it's like a pickup or something that uses an inventory system. Like maybe you want to save the inventory, maybe you want to save the number of times your player dies, the score that they count, the elapsed time in the game, and so on. Basically, saving and loading isn't something that needs to be confined to any particular blueprint. Instead, it should be something which is accessible from any blueprint anywhere in the game for any purpose. And so to do that, we do it in a function library. So if I right click and go blueprint and then blueprint function library, I go bpfl, and then I'm just going to call this saving, and then we're going to open that up. Now the first thing that we need to do is create a function that actually loads or creates a save game. So I'm going to call this up here cl underscore load or create save data. And the reason that I call it CL, that's just my shorthand for client, because when you're using multiplayer games, I like to differentiate between functions that can be called on any client of the game, or functions that should only be called on the server, which I prefix with auth, like for authority. But saving data, this can be used on the server, or this could be used on any client, but we're not going to do too much multiplayer today. But basically, your save data, where it stores the data, is inside of your when you're in the engine, it stores it inside of saved, and then there'll be a saved folder in there, which I'll show you in a minute. But basically, it's always stored on the client's machine, whoever calls this function. But let's not worry about that for now. The first thing that we want to do is, does save game exist? And this is going to check if a save game exists. Blah, simple. I'm going to plug the slot name into there. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that. What I'm actually going to do is create a new function, which I'm going to call client underscore get save data slot name, and I'm just going to try and spell that a little bit better. And then I'm going to make this just a return node like this, and I'm going to add an output which will be a string, which will just be slot name like that. And I'm just going to call this save data. Could be called player data, inventory data, save data, whatever. But basically, I'm going to drop that in here, convert it to a pure function like this, and then plug that into there. And the reason that I do this like this is because this slot name is going to be called in a lot of different places, and rather than manually copying the slot name to each different node, like for example, if we'd say load game from slot, rather than copying the slot name from there to there, I can just plug this into there, and we're going to have access to the same name from everywhere. So that's just an easy way to make sure that all your save data is reading the correct name, and you're not loading up the game and wondering where the hell your save data's gone because you're reading it from the wrong slot or saving it to the wrong slot name. Anyway, so the first thing that we do is, does save game exist? Then we add a branch like this. If it does exist, then we load it just like we're doing over here, and I'm just going to copy that and put that under there. If it doesn't exist, then we need to create a save game object, and then we need to create a save game class. Okay, so this is all just creating and loading, but we need an actual save game asset before we can actually do anything, so before we can actually store any data. So to create one, we go blueprint class, save game down here, and I'm going to call that SG for save game underscore, I don't know, save data. And this is where we can create variables that we actually want to save. So let's just create a dummy variable. We'll just call it, it'll be a type float, and just call it playtime. And what we'll do is we'll save the amount of time that a player spent inside a game. So now that that's created there, we can save or load this, and this will be stored independent of the game actually running. So we can load that into a new game instance and whatever. So now when we create the save game object, this is where we put the save game class in there, and then the first thing that we want to do is save game to slot. So we've created the object, now we need to save it to a slot, and again we're going to put the slot name in here like this. And then from there we can do a return node, where what we might do is pass this save game object through here and just call this SG underscore save data ref for reference. So creating the game, saving it to the slot, and then returning it over there. And up the top up here, we're loading a game from the slot, but this variable here is just of a save game object reference. It isn't specific to our SG save data. You can see up the top right, the parent class is the save game object, but this is now a subclass of that. So what we need to do is cast to save data like that, and now we should be able to copy this return node and then plug that into there and then return that. Okay, so this is loading or creating a save data asset. Okay, so now that we've got this function which can either create or load a save file, let's show you how you can actually use that to write some data and to save it. So if I create a new blueprint class and call this BP underscore play time tracker, basically I'm going to create a blueprint which can now record the amount of time that a player has spent in the game, and when they open the game, load the previous game time that they saved, and when they close the game, save the new amount of time they spent in the game. So if I drop that into the world, what we'll do on begin play is the first thing that we'll need to do is either load or create the save game data. So if we go client load or create save data, if a save game hasn't been created yet, this function, this boolean will return false, and then what it'll do is it'll create a save game object with the defaults that you've set into the save game data here. So by default we want the save game playtime to be 0, obviously. And so then what we can do is we can get the playtime from here, and then we could promote that to a variable if we wanted, so it's saved locally inside of this blueprint as the loaded playtime, and then maybe what we'll do is we'll just print that to the screen like that. Okay, so if we jump in the game like this, you can see the playtime is 0 because that's the default that's inside the save game here. Now, where this is saved, I mentioned this before, but I'll just quickly show you again. Inside of your project folder, now we've got this, inside the project folder saved, you've got this save games folder, save data. This is the slot name that we gave it with this function here, save data. So if you wanted to have a different, more easily identifiable name, like if you had a bunch of different .sav files in here, you might want to give them different slot names, like whether you might have 4 different slots per player data, like in lots of old games, like they used to have 4 different save files so that you could share the cartridge with your family or whatever. Or maybe if your game has multiple players that are all playing together on Steam or something, maybe you have save data where it records things that other players have done locally on your machine, or like whatever. Like you can do lots of different variations here. You can do backups as well, like you could have a save data and then like a date, so if the player needed to roll back their save data or whatever, you could reload an older one and then they could play with that instead, and like so on. But if you delete that in here as well, that'll obviously delete the save data, and then when you go inside here and play again, that function would have called on begin play inside our playtime tracker, and now that save data will be back in here again because it's just recreated it. So you could copy this and like send it to your friends and whatever, and they'd have like your save data as well. Anyway, so now if we wanted to write to this, let's add an event end play, and what we'll do is we will get or create load or create the save data again on end play, and we will get the playtime that's loaded, and then we will add a float, or add, what's it called, they've changed it, yeah, add operator, and we will add get game time since creation, and then we will set the playtime here like that. So what this is doing is this is getting our save data with the slot name, then we're setting the playtime, and now what we need to do is we actually need to save this again. Just because we've set it doesn't mean it's actually saved it to the slot. So the way that we do that is we will grab this here and we will say save game to slot, and we need a slot name here. So we can use that function that we created in our blueprint function library, but what I actually like to do is on this return node over here where we're getting or creating our save game data, is I actually like to just plug the slot name into the end like this. This is just personal preference. And so then in the playtime tracker I can just put that in like that, and you can see we've loaded the game or created the game, set the variable, and then saved it to the slot, and then that's done. So now if we jump in, it's printed 0 because we had no playtime, but now we're running around waiting a little bit. Now I've quit. This should have called on end play and saved the playtime to the slot. So now when I boot it back up again, it'll print the new playtime, which was 5.29 blah 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 seconds. Okay, so if I run around again, wait, play again, now we're at 9.8 seconds and it's recording our playtime. Now if I go into save games, delete the save data, we're back to 0. Okay, so that is how the save data works. So a couple of other things I'd like to point out. Obviously you don't have to just do this with a float. You could, this is inside the save game save data asset. You can store text, you can store an array of transforms, you could store maybe a class list of actors that go with those transforms, so like you could save the entire state of like all the enemies in the world or something, for example. So like in a similar way to how we've done this playtime tracker, you could have an actor which on end play say gets all the actors of class that have a specific tag or whatever, saves their transforms, and then next time you open up the game you could spawn all of the actors at those transforms. So you could have like a persistent world, you know, that saves when you close it and loads it when you open it. Like that's just one example. You can store colors, like maybe you have like a color of your mannequin or something, like your players customize their character. You could store that in here and then load that at begin play just like this. So basically you can use this end play node, or you could create your own custom event and call it save or whatever, and then when the player interacts with the save thing, say it's like a save block or something, like in Paper Mario games you'd headbutt the block and then the game would save, or you'd have a button in your menu which triggers the save event, and then basically you call this where you get all the relevant variables, update everything in the save file, and then save the game to the slot, and then next time you open up the game you load everything from the slot and then run the relevant things like update the HUD or spawn the actors in the game or whatever. So add anything you want into here, and you can put these into categories. Like this could be like you could have an inventory tab, you could have like a player stats tab, like etc. But you could also create different save game objects as well for different types of data that you want to store. It doesn't all have to be in the one spot. And there can be benefits to doing it in different assets as well, because you also want to have a function that can erase save data. So if we go into functions again and create a new one called client erase save data, the way that you erase the save data is you want to get the data slot name, and then you want to say delete game in slot. Boom. It's literally that simple. Call that, and then that'll have the same effect as clicking on your save data and deleting it inside of your folder here. Now when a player is playing a packaged game, their save data isn't stored in the Unreal Projects folder, obviously. You can find the directory of that online somewhere. It's in like users, and then app data, which is a hidden folder by default. You have to do something like click properties or something to show hidden folders. I can't remember exactly. But then basically there will be a folder which shows the package name of the game, like the project title, and then inside of there they'll have a save folder, and you can delete that or whatever, or you can just use this node here. But this will delete it'll delete it from the correct directory in a packaged game. One other thing that I'll point out is this load or create save data. This has to be an impure function. If you were to, let me just copy this for demonstration's sake and have a pure function here like this, and then I say client load or create save data. If you're setting playtime here like this, and then save game to slot like this, similar to what we're doing above, but with a pure function. This is setting the playtime in one instance of the save data, and then it's saving it to another instance of the same save data. And what will actually happen is that this won't actually save the data to your slot. You need to have this node in the execution chain, because this pin is being called twice, one to set the playtime and then one to save the game to slot. You can't do it with a pure function, otherwise it literally won't save. It's got to be in the execution chain. So that's just something to keep in mind, because that's confused the shit out of me in the past, because my data hasn't been saving and I haven't been sure why. Yeah. So that's basically it. Like I said, you can create all kinds of new blueprints, and you can access that save data from any blueprint. You can set that save data from any blueprint by using save game to slot, and then just saving it like that. So this is the core functionality that you need for a save game, and then in between you can set playtime, you can set what do we call them, new variable, you can set whatever the hell you want, and then plug that in the middle, and then save game to slot, and then everything will be saved. You can also use this to just read the data as well. Like if you wanted to display something on the HUD, for example, inside of the bindings, you could just say get playtime like that, and then just plug that into the return value. So you can access it from anywhere, you can save it anywhere, and then you can also delete it from anywhere. Oh, I'm not using that one, sorry. Using the erase save data node that we created in here. So that's it. If there's any questions, drop them in the comments below, and I hope this was helpful. Goodbye.